Okay, Steve, stand by for me because we have the RNC Communications Director, Sean Spicer, joining us now. Sean, good to have you here, and I just want to give everybody the update that we're just moments away from the president coming out to speak, so forgive me if I have to jump to President Obama and his remarks. But do you, after listening to what Speaker Boehner said, there's really not a lot of gimme room coming from the right on this, but what are the alternate plans that the right would suggest other than, as Speaker Boehner said, scrapping this altogether?
Well, I'm glad to talk about that, but I think there are three kind of important things touching on both what Kristen said and Steve. One is this problem was created by President Obama. I mean, he unequivocally made it clear that you could keep your plan if you liked it. He was very clear that even if you had a catastrophic plan, he talked about a hypothetical ACME catastrophic plan, that you could keep it. He created this problem, not us. Two, I think to Steve's point about 2014, there's rumors out there that he's going to say that there's a one-year delay. And on the way down here, I looked at my calendar. And oh, by the way, 1 year from now is when an election occurs, and conveniently, the delay would occur right after the election. So all of these 2014 Democrats that are running for the hills right now would get a one-year reprieve until after their election. So I question, frankly, the motive of this. I think that the entire intent of it is to help these 2014 Democrats who are concerned that this is going to cost them their reelection, that this is being done for them. And then third, the real big thing is, where is the authority to do this? Every time there seems to be a problem with Obamacare, the president unilaterally says, well, I'm going to delay this, I'm going to exempt this group. But when Republicans talk about fixing or replacing it, it's the cry is, how dare you? You can't do this. It's a law. It was passed. But when the president does it unilaterally, Democrats have no problem with that. When Republicans try to do it by votes on the floor, then it's how dare we do this law that was passed a few years ago?
Republicans shut down the whole government.
To actually doing this right.
Sean, Republicans shut down the whole government over the ACA. It wasn't such a tactic to repeal or defund.
As you recall,
or
we passed, but we passed a bill that said we're going to delay this. We'll fund everything but Obamacare in a one-year delay. And everyone said that we were shutting down the government. How dare we do that? Now the president comes out when his own Democrats run for the hills and says, I'm going to do it unilaterally. And no one has a problem with that. I think it's unbelievably hypocritical for people to say when Republicans tried to do it correctly and legislatively, that was, how dare we possibly consider that?
But you did it by shutting down the government. Sean, no. It was done by trying to shut down the government.
It was quite the opposite. But Thomas, it was actually quite the opposite. We funded everything but it and said we're going to fund it, but we want to delay Obamacare by a year.
But the government still shut down.
Legislatively.
Did the government shut down or not? Based on that principle.
But if House Democrats, hold on, but answer me this. If House Democrats had joined us and said, we'll agree to a one-year delay, we'll fund the entire thing, the government would have stayed open, we would have delayed Obamacare by a year, and we would have done it constitutionally and legislatively correctly. Now, when the president comes out and says, I'm going to potentially delay this for at least a year, nobody has a problem with that when he does it unilaterally, bypassing Congress. Then it's not a problem. That doesn't seem too constitutional to me.
Steve?
Well, first of all, let's see if nobody has a problem with this. Like I said, we don't know yet what exactly the president's going to propose, and there are an awful lot of Democrats, there are an awful lot of supporters of this law this week who have been aghast at the idea of all these Democrats who are coming out and saying they want to make sort of significant legislative fixes to the law, changes to the law right now, because they fear it will undermine the law. So let's see if everybody is just okay with whatever Obama proposes. But what Sean said there just confused me for a second, because he was looking at this idea of allowing people to continue with their plans for another year and saying this is a convenient way of Democrats insulating themselves in 2014. That's what's really behind this. But again, I mentioned the Fred Upton bill. Fred Upton's a Republican congressman from Michigan who proposed this before we had any talk today of Barack Obama extending this for a year. Fred Upton, Republican congressman from Michigan, in a bill scheduled to be voted on and probably passed by the Republican House tomorrow, would allow people to keep their plans for one more year. So if it's a sinister plot by Obama to protect Democrats in 2014, I guess Republicans, including Fred Upton, are in on that plot.
Is that true, Sean?
No, Steve, but Steve, the difference is when you do it legislatively correctly and by the Constitution, all of those members have to take a vote. And to realize this, what the president potentially is about to do, because you're right, we don't exactly know the details of what he's going to put out right now, would basically ensure that they don't have to take those key votes. And he would give them cover by just doing it unilaterally, which is not constitutional.
So when we...
That's the difference. It's allowing them not to have to take those key votes that put them at odds with not only their words, but their previous votes that have said Obamacare is the way to go. Now they actually get a free pass. I think that's a substantial difference.
All right, so when we talk about the differences here, Nancy Pelosi was out earlier today saying that she feels that this can be done probably through the White House. But we know every time that anything with the ACA has gone to the House, we know which way the wind blows. So is this the way that the president gets to try to put a patch over the issue by talking about the potential?
Yeah, no, look, in terms of, as I said earlier, clearly the president and the White House and Democrats, do not want this, the Upton bill, to pass tomorrow. And clearly this is an attempt to sort of forestall this. On the other end, though, if you look at what's sort of marinating right now on the Senate side, where you've had Democrats like Mary Landrieu from Louisiana, Dianne Feinstein from California, Jeff Merkley, a liberal from Oregon, they're proposing something that in some ways goes even farther than the Fred Upton bill. And they're talking about an indefinite delay, basically indefinitely allowing people to continue with their policies, not the 1 year cap that the Upton bill and that apparently the White House is talking about right here. So clearly the Democrats and the White House have been rattled by what's happened this week, and this is an attempt to sort of put an end to it before you get into some sort of an impasse between the Senate and the House.
Kristen Welker, who's still with us at the White House, when you're talking to your sources there, what is the temperature of how people are reacting within the West Wing, not to just the issues with the website rollout, but the issues now that have come up with people who have lost their plans, and now on the heels of President Clinton coming out saying, well, this is something that the president should do. If people like their plans, he thinks that they should have them. How much of that has put pressure on the West Wing, with Bill Clinton's words?
Well, I think there's no doubt that the folks here behind the scenes within the Obama administration are feeling a lot of pressure. I've covered this White House for several years, and I can tell you that there certainly is a sense of urgency to try to deal with these issues that seem to be mounting. I think that's why you see the president coming out today making this announcement. I think the other part of that strategy, he's going to travel to Cleveland later today to talk about the economy. So to some extent, they're also trying to continue to have control of at least part of the message that is coming out of this administration. But look, they're feeling the heat, and if you look at the polls, that tells you everything. The president dealing with some of the lowest poll numbers since he was reelected. So certainly they are trying to tamp down the growing criticism about this, and I think we can't state enough how important it is for this administration that the website actually get fixed for a majority of Americans by the end of this month. That is what they have projected will happen. The question is that actually going to happen? If it doesn't happen, that is going to just make this problem that much worse politically, but also from a practical standpoint, because it could threaten the amount of people who are actually able to get onto the website and sign up. And of course, this entire law depends in large part on young people signing up, young, healthy people in large numbers. They're projecting more than 2 million of those young, healthy people. They're saying that is what they need. So that's really the next big deadline that they're looking at and hoping to meet.
Steve, they always say that you never get a second chance to make a first impression, but November 30th, they're hoping to get this second chance to make a first impression, as Kristen points out, to young Americans, to build that foundational bed of people to lift up the program, because that's really what it relies on, the fact that young people invest in it.
Well, right. You're talking about trying to build a risk pool here. You're talking about you have the sick people who are going to cost more for insurers to cover. You're trying to balance that out with the young, healthy people who are going to bring the costs down for everybody. You're trying to build that risk pool. And now we're talking about the end of this month, the end of November being, that's when they want the website up and running. But really, they're also talking about the date. You're talking about the end of March. Mm-hmm. That's when that individual mandate penalty kicks in. And I don't mean to sound too naive here, because yes, clearly there have been huge problems with this, and the political situation for Obamacare, I think, has gotten a lot worse in the last few days. I don't mean to understate that or anything. At the same time, there's still ample opportunity for this thing to work. And I think that the backdrop for what the White House is trying to do today is it's trying to ensure that there are no major permanent changes made to this thing in this sort of moment of panic panic, in these weeks of panic that we're living through right now, that will make it difficult or impossible to create the healthy risk pool that this law is basically predicated around. That if you can get through these few weeks, if you can get into December, if you can get the website up and running, if you can have the threat of the mandate penalty start to come onto the horizon, young people will look at that and say, okay, I better sign up, and oh yeah, by the way, here's a website where I can go and sign up. And if you can do that, and if you can build the risk pool, then more and more people are going to want in because the rates are going to go down. More and more insurers are going to want to be in because that's where the action is. So there is still a perfectly viable scenario where this thing works.
All right, so if we talk about where this thing works and the fix that we expect to hear from the president, Kristen, is the action that's going to happen most likely weighted toward executive action as opposed to legislative action?
It seems like that is how it is being weighted right now, Thomas. You're absolutely right. And we know from the start that was the goal. The president wanted to find an administrative fix to this. Having said that, it's not just Fred Upton who's proposing legislation. We also know that Mary Landrieu, Democrat, also has a proposal for fixing this. And some members of Congress saying they want to vote on this. They want to get on the record with how they stand, with where they stand on fixing this problem. If you like your plan, you can keep your plan. So several members, those who are up for re-election, eager to actually weigh in on this issue. But as of right now, per our understanding, the president is going to propose an administrative action. But again, this comes back to the question of teeth and whether or not this is actually enforceable. If folks look at this on Capitol Hill and feel as though there's not enough enforcement here, you could see the effort to get some type of legislative fix continue. Thomas?
Right, so Sean Spicer is still with us. And Sean, let me ask you, because if people get their wish, and I've always, I say be careful what you wish for, you just might get it. So if there are Americans out there who get their wish that they get to keep their plan and they get to keep it extended for a period of time, and then they go to try to reap some of that benefit only to find out that they're truly not covered, isn't that just going to be another gold mine for Republicans to chime in on and say, well, it's because of Obamacare?
I think most Americans are well aware, of their plan, what's covered and what's not. And in some cases, they specifically chose a plan because either a doctor or a hospital or a particular prescription or drug was covered under the plan that they got. So the reason I think you're seeing the angst that exists right now is because when people were sold this idea of Obamacare, in a lot of cases, they were said, okay, I'm not sure I agree or not, but I know the president's telling me I can keep my doctor. I like it. I like my plan. I like what I pay. What at least we're doing is giving them an option to say, for now, you can at least get everything that you were promised. Hopefully, at the same time, we as Republicans can pass some things that will create stronger alternatives to this. But right now, what we've got to do is help the people that have been damaged in the first place. As people who are getting these letters day in and day out being told you're losing your plan, the new plan may not cover your doctor, it's going to cost more, et cetera, et cetera. We've got to kind of calm that fear right now.
But when we talk about the alternatives, what is a replace alternative? We know where the votes have been for repeal or defund, but what have been the replace options based on where we know that the ACA stands at this point?
Well, there's a couple of areas that we actually agree with. Obviously, there's general agreement on keeping kids under 26 insured. Most insurance companies say that they would continue that policy regardless. Two, pre-existing conditions is something that there's general agreement in the party. But then Republicans believe in a much more market-based solution that lowers cost and creates better health care solutions. For example, allowing people to buy over state lines so that you could buy a plan that you actually thought was better for you or your family that was offered in a different state. Right now, that's prohibited. That kind of competition would actually help create better plans and lower costs. Allowing small businesses and individuals to pool their resources and numbers to get the same buying advantages that big corporations get, giving the same tax treatment to individuals and small individuals and self-employed people that large corporations have. There's a number of things that both drive the cost down and create health solutions. The problem is that you're asking us to compare our solutions to a complete government takeover, which is something that we're adamantly opposed to for the exact reason that we're seeing now. And the one thing that I would disagree with in terms of what Steve was alluding to is that this is not about a website. It's not about getting that thing up and making it work. I think that the problem that they're going to have is that they're predicating young people getting on this website and saying, I don't like what I see.
Sean Spicer, RNC Communications Director. Sean, great to have you on. Thanks for your time, and we continue to wait.